I'd like to start this post by sharing a common assumption we have where I'm from. If you drive a Mercedes, Audi or BMW, we will automatically assume you're a complete show-off and not that great a human being. On to what happened. There is this long stretch of road with free parking next to my block of flats. While we do have parking spaces below our entrance, most people who live here take up 2 or 3, depending on how many cars the household owns. Since the roadside parking is free, no one really starts any arguments and we just park our cars there. It only takes half a minute longer to get to it, no problem. Due to a certain nuisance to our health raging about, we don't really leave the house much. That being said, imagine how annoyed I was today when I set off to my car and find that I can't enter it due to a shiny new Prestige Audi parked so close to it, I couldn't even squeeze between them, let alone attempt to enter it through the driver's side. Now, the parking space is not small, there is more than enough space to park your car properly and enter it with no problem. I always make sure to park mine in the center of the box, but this guy literally put his right tires in the box my car was parked in. A whole quarter of his box on the left side was vacant. This couldn't just be an accident, he had to have seen how he parked when he left his car. I grumpily climbed in through the passenger side, went about my business, bought every necessity for the next few days and came back. The Audi was still there. So of course, I did the exact thing he did to me. I parked on his right, just close enough for him to not be able to open his driver's side door. Have fun repeating what I had to do to be able to use my car. I can see the parking from my window. As soon as I see the Audi is no longer there, I'll move my car to make more room for my next parking neighbor. I've always been fascinated with the Kent State shootings of May 4, 1970, where a National Guardsman shot and murdered 4 students in a volley of bullets during a Vietnam protest. I was a student at Kent State much later and lived in the dorm near the site. What was always interesting to me was how nobody who was there that day could agree on how it started. Students said the guard just opened fire. But members of the guard claimed someone shot at them and they fired back in fear and self-defense. Eventually, I learned of a man named Terry Norman, who may hold the answer to this mystery. Terry Norman was a student at the time and was on the payroll of the FBI and the local police, who gave him money to snap pictures and take the names of the members of the Kent State chapter of Students for a Democratic Society. Norman was in the middle of the protest that day and was the only student who was known to have carried a gun onto campus. After the shootings, Norman gave his gun to the Kent police, whom he worked for. Witnesses came forward later, claiming they overheard Norman admit to firing the weapon and accidentally instigating the event. Norman was never charged and moved away from Kent shortly after this and got a job with the police in Washington, D.C. Today, he lives in a secluded area of North Carolina, in a house atop a mountain with a secured gate at the entrance to the road so no visitors can come up to his door. If you're interested in learning more, I explore the theory in depth in an episode of The Philosophy of Crime. I developed an online app for a company to consolidate data across systems because having to log into multiple systems and then mentally visualize the data connections is a pain in the a. Users, ITIL certified service managers, of my online app had to log in and just to click on the approved or the rejected button for standard operating procedure, which would then be reported to higher management. Now, this is an internal-only tool and I designed it so that it's easy to use. Users who don't need to approve or reject anything could just view the data without logging in. Also, I was the only developer and only one to support for this tool. Cast 1. Service Manager, SM 2. My Supervisor, SUP 3. Me. Sup, hey, I just got this call from this really important senior service manager about your Thule. Can I transfer the call? Me, sure. Sup, now, she's really important and very good friend of mine. Me, foreshadowing stupid questions if my supervisor and this service manager are very good friends / yeah, okay. 15 seconds later. SM, hi. I'm trying to use your tool and I can't seem to accept or reject anything. Me, have you logged in? Because you have to log in if you need to accept or reject anything. SM, of course I've logged in. Your system is broken and you need to fix it. Me, well, I don't see any issues when I access the system. Can you explain what you're seeing? SM, I logged in. Nothing works. Get it working. Me, alright, it's going to be like that / okay, I've checked that nothing is blocking your account. Can you tell me what you see on the screen? SM, I see your broken system. Me, describe what you see. Ignore that you think it's broken. I see the homepage. When I click on things, it works. But I cannot approve or reject anything. Why can't you fix this? Me, hold on. Let me diagnose a bit more. Do you see the horizontal menu bar? Yes. Me, do you see the drop-down menus that say blah 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 and blah 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 and blah blah blah? Yes, yes, yes. Me. Okay, at the very rightmost option, what do you see? What do you mean? Me, well, you should see your name right at the end of that line. Well, it's not there. Me, so what does it say? It says please click /. And hashtag X200B. She hung up because the system was telling her to log in. So me and my family 3 went to lunch with another family, 5. We went to a steakhouse for 2 reasons. 1, we all love steak, 2, it's the safest thing for my mom to eat, as she has a severe dairy allergy. So we all sit and order the steak. My mom asks and we find out they dip their steak in butter before they cook it. So my mom asked to have the cooks cook the steak in another pan. The waitress said no problem. Cut to all of us getting our steaks. Oh, they were perfect. My mom is about to take her first bite when we hear someone scream no. From across the restaurant. We look and there comes our waitress running at us. She gets to the table and takes my mom's plate, out of breath. She tells us the cook messed up and put the butterless steak on the wrong plate. And she had seen my mom about to eat the steak. Mom got a new steak and we left the waitress a big tip. It's been rare we find a waitress who don't get huffy about helping out with my mom's food needs a bit. But there has to be another one who went this hard to make sure my mom didn't die. Anyways, that's my one really great story of the most amazing waitress. I work at a bar in Wisconsin right over the Illinois border. Right now we're doing carry-out only, so I thought it'd be harder to notice when tourist season arrived. Boy was I wrong. There were a couple other minor instances but this one stands out. I answered the phone nicely as I was bagging up a carry-out order. Most people start with hello or I'd like to place an order, but this gentleman's time was clearly worth more. I need a patty melt, he barks into the phone. Yay, definitely, if you could just give me 1 minute I'll be right back with you. Now it does take me a cool 30 seconds probably to hand this other customer his food, say thank you and goodbye, but when I came back to the phone barky dude had hung up. It was an hour before close and we could have had this guy's food ready in 20 minutes if he'd waited 30 seconds or called back. But what does he do? He called the bar owner, who has been holed up in Florida at their second home since this started, and idioted that he couldn't place an order. I didn't even need to, but I checked the caller ID to confirm the area code. I hate entitled people, and people on vacation seem to be some of the worst. Like many companies, the hospital I work for has been screening patients and employees coming in due to the pandemic. About a week ago, myself and 2 others were screening at the emergency department. Because the sun was shining through, the area we were in was uncomfortably hot. Our solution? Prop the doors open to let in a breeze. They were automatic doors that can be kept open with a flip of a switch, for 10 glorious minutes. Richard, the douchey maintenance guy, picture John Finley from Tiger King, is outside working and he does not like this. He come over and shouts, "You can't keep these doors open. It's a security risk. WHO told you could prop open these doors?" We just look at each other and tell him to chill and just flip the switch to let the doors close. About a half hour later, I have to run outside but get stopped at the door by another screener trying to tell me something. The doors begin to shut and I stood there holding the door listening to the other person. Richard happens to see this and shouts, "Hey! What did I tell you about those doors? Get in or get out. I don't want you breaking my doors." I pay him no mind and head out to do what I needed to. Before long, it's time to head home, so I start making my way to the rear entrance towards the parking lot. On my way, I walk past a door being propped open by a large rock. Just outside the door is Richard. I poked my head out and with a shooty grin I shouted at him, "This is a security risk." And I kicked the rock holding the open and let it shut. Richard had no way of getting back in and would have had to walk quite a ways to access a door that would. Lamau. Got a ticket, then a call right after that from a distressed user, stating that their laptop will not boot up. User, me. And hashtag X200B. User, so, I'm trying to boot up my laptop and it will not boot up. Me, okay, unplug it and hold the power button for 30 seconds and try to turn it back on. User, okay, well now it boots farther than before, but it's giving me an error, something about a critical battery power issue. Me, was it plugged in before? User, yes, it has been on charge all morning. Me, everything is plugged into the laptop all the way, including on the power cord going from the wall to the AC adapter to the laptop. User, yes, it's going from the power strip to the AC adapter, and going to the laptop. Everything is plugged in all the way. Me, is the power strip on? User, yes, well hold on. No, it is. Me, internally, sure, it was. Me, okay, humor me. Plug the power cable into the wall directly. User, okay, hey, it's booting up now. Me, okay, sounds like your power strip might be going bad. Me internally, or you didn't have the power strip turned on in the first place. User, I'm in now, thanks, click. And hashtag X200B. Users are funny that way. When I was young, I believe about 8 years old, my family was attending my little brother's soccer game. Me being a bored ADHD youth, I ran off to play in a nearby park within view of where the parents were standing. The view of some of the park was slightly obscured by a few trees, which is an important tidbit for later. I wasn't the only kid at the park, and with some organization from one big kid we all became involved in an exciting game of tag. As the game dissipated, the big kid approached me. If my memory is correct, he was around 14 years old. He introduced a game of hide and seek with me, and after it asked me if I wanted to see his secret hiding spot. Now, I had been very educated by my parents on how to avoid sketchy situations and avoid abductions, and this otherwise would have set off red flags for me, except for the fact that he was a teenager, so in my little head he was just another kid. He praised it as a secret spot where we could spy on people but nobody could see us, and claimed he had stashed candy there that he wanted to share with me. Once we pressed further into the woods, I was grabbed from behind a tree by an older man whose face was obscured from me. Within a moment of him beginning to drag me, I was pushed to the ground when the sounds of loud yelling began to draw closer to us. The cops arrived within a minute of my parents alerting me missing and ended up capturing the 14-year-old boy, who was covered in needle marks, and finding a nearby shaded van filled with illicit drugs. I believe they found that man shortly after. From earlier, when I had started playing hide and go seek on the outskirts of the trees surrounding the park, my parents had noticed ahead of time that I wasn't visible from the park anymore. After a few minutes of calling my name, they decided to call the police, who arrived just in time, and I hate to imagine what could have happened if my mom hadn't been so attentive. Textbook child abduction guy, let's not meet again. So this just happened this morning. Like many grocery stores during this time, our store has designated one door for entering and one for exiting. One of the employees has to stand by the door to sanitize the carts and baskets, and to let people know when they can enter. The other thing we have to do is direct people to the exit door if they try and exit through the wrong door. Most people are cool with it and go out the other door, but you do have the occasional complainer that you just let go because you don't want to deal with it. I saw this woman walking toward the entrance door, so I walked toward her and said, "Sorry, you're going to have to exit through the other door." She stopped and said, "Sorry, I didn't know you were doing that. Maybe you guys should put up some signs so this doesn't happen." Then I pointed at the sign that said entrance only that was right next to me and said, "You mean like this?" She looked at the sign, then turned on her heel and quickly walked to the exit. For context, our building has a shipping/receiving area that all mail and packages are supposed to be dropped off at. There are 2 signs when you enter the parking lot, directing delivery and mail persons to the appropriate area. On the front door we have signs saying that no deliveries will be accepted at the front door, with directions to the shipping area. The front doors are glass, so you can see through them, meaning you can see me at the front desk. Because of the pandemic, I am not even allowed to open the doors, they're locked and you need a key card to get in. The mail car pulls up to the front door, which isn't normal. Usually it goes to the right area, and the mailman gets out with a tote of mail. I know he's not our normal mailman, this is a young white guy, so he must be new. Our normal guy is an older black guy that the receiving people love. He gets to the door, yanks on it. It's locked, so he starts pounding on the glass. I ignore him, assuming he will read the signs on the door. I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm literally not allowed to do anything for him. After a good 2 minutes of pounding on the door, he hasn't stopped. I go to the door and do what I'm allowed to. I point to the sign that in big, bold letters says, "No deliveries will be accepted at this store." He shouts loudly enough for me to hear him through the door. Where am I supposed to go? He didn't look at the sign for more than 2 seconds. I yell to the shipping area and point to the sign again. He didn't hear me, so I yell louder, but he can't hear me through the door. I keep pointing to the sign, which has step-by-step directions to the shipping area, and I point in the general direction to get there too. After a few minutes of failed communication, he yells FCKIT, throws the tote to the ground and drives off. I call the receiving people and ask them to send someone up. They have PPE and can handle the incoming stuff. I don't get any PPE provided, so I'm not allowed to touch anything. This happened about 2 years ago. It was my first holiday season at a particular beauty retailer. As you can imagine, there was a long line at registers, and not just a regular long line, it was a whole day long line. So you can imagine what that feels like. We have all hands on deck. Every register is manned, so we are plowing through as quickly as we can. There's only 2 characters, me, and rude customer, RC. I'm on the register closest to the door, and a customer approaches from my right side, so not the next customer in line. RC, do I have to wait in this line to do a return? Me, in my customer service alter ego voice, yes ma'am. Unfortunately you do, but I can give you a sample for the long wait. Smile, I know it's frustrating around the holidays. RC, do I really have to? Like, is there not another place I can wait to do a return? Me, you can wait in the line, and we will be happy to service you when it's your turn. RC was visibly upset. She huffed and walked to the back of the line, which was probably about 50 customers deep at that point. She did make a complaint about me in which she expressed anger about me telling her she had to wait in line. I just do not understand. My first post, hope you enjoy. So this happened when I was about 18. So about 10 years ago. I was visiting my boyfriend at the time at his college dorm. He went to a pretty popular college in California, so there was a massive campus. We met up at his dorm and decided to go over to his cousin's apartment that was across the campus. We were drinking and smoking, doing as young adolescents do, and I smoked a little too much and ended up passing out on the couch. All of a sudden I had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to wake up. I opened my eyes and realized that the blinds to the patio were open and you could see right into the room where I was sleeping. I then realized that I was alone in the room, so I called out for my boyfriend, but I didn't get a response. So I came to the conclusion that I'm in the apartment alone. I get up and go outside and see my boyfriend and his cousin walking around the parking lot area. I'm super confused at this point, so I go and see why they left me alone in the apartment. Apparently they had heard a girl screaming and were seeing what was going on and if they could do anything to help. There had been a couple of girls that had been assaulted recently on the campus, so everybody was on high alert. So we walked around for a couple of minutes, but we didn't see anybody or hear any more screams, so we started heading back to the apartment. This literally only took about 5 minutes, maybe less. As we are on our way back to his apartment, we see this person in all black with their hood on, come out of nowhere and walk right into the apartment. I was just asleep a few minutes prior. But it wasn't like a regular walk, it was more like a power walk, and it looked like he was holding something in his hands. We all kind of scream hey, and start running back to the apartment. The guy then runs out of the apartment and hops down to this area underneath the patio area. By the time we get to where he jumped, he was already gone, which kind of creeped me out because where he jumped was like this creek area and it was completely pitch black. Not to mention we weren't that far from the apartment, so it only took us about 30 to 45 seconds to run back. I'm pretty sure whoever it was saw me asleep on the couch. It gives me chills to think what could have happened if I didn't wake up. I was all alone and my boyfriend and his cousin were distracted by someone they thought were in need of help. So creepy guy who likes to prey on sleeping girls, let's not meet. This actually happened today, at around noon, on Long Island, New York in Nassau County. I went to a drive-through market, called Dairy Barn, where you can drive through and get whatever, milk, bread, eggs, beer, and in my case, water. I pulled through and made my way up the street, turned onto the road that has a funeral home, and was driving behind a utility truck, blocking my view. He pulled over, I kept moving forward, and that's when I noticed I was behind a funeral procession. No big deal, they're going right, I'm going left. I don't know why, but I put on my hazards to blend in to mask my mess up, because I had cars pulling out of the funeral home getting in line behind me. That was the mistake. Why did I put my hazards on? I made the left, turned off my hazards, and realized the line of cars behind me with their hazards on, following me. They followed me about a half mile up the road and then turned around, in the middle of the road. TL, doctor, split a funeral procession and had them follow me. For those who love Pear products, try not to do this. I am an avid Pear fan for years. It's easy to use. This happened to me in a couple of Pear stores in my state. My phone, at the time, was acting weird. Like being possessed by a demon. It turns out to be the dreaded touch disease that plagued the Pear phone 6 and 6 Plus. I went to one store to order a replacement phone. They said it'll be there within a week. I returned a week later and they said they didn't have it. So, I left and came back a few days later. No phone. This had been going on for a month. I understand that they are doing their job, but this is ridiculous. To clarify my actions, I have a temper. I'm also not an entitled person. But, at that moment, it gotten that bad. After work, on Valentine's Day, I went back to the Pear store. Mind you, I had a bad couple of days and the group of ladies add fuel to my fire. I came in and laid it on the poor guy. I yelled at him for 5 minutes stating I've been coming into their store on my days off, after work during my days shifts checking on them to see if they have my replacement phone. And every time I asked, they don't have it. I said the magic words that no retail associate don't want to hear. Get me your manager. The poor chap got his manager. PM, ma'am, how can I help you? Me, look, I've been here almost every day to get my replacement phone because it has the touch disease. I understand that you're doing your darn job. All I want is to pay for my replacement phone and leave. Please tell me you have it. PM, I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have it here. You do realize we have a sister store here. I did contact them and they have a phone waiting for you. Finally, I can get it. So, I left to their other store in the mall up north. I paid for my new phone and left to go home. Remember, there's a right way to be a Karen. Back in 2016 when I was in grade 12 I remember posting on Facebook "It's skinny jeans, not make you skinny jeans." It divided the whole grade, where half said I was being fat phobic, hateful towards all bodies, controlling what people can wear, etc. The other half thought it was hilarious that people were so triggered and understood what I was saying. All I meant to say was, wear clothing that is made for your size, and that even someone who needs a size 2 squeezing into a size 00 isn't going to look flattering. I don't know why, but people like to throw themselves into the fire and call themselves victims. I was in the weightlifting social group and whenever someone brought it up all the people in the group would crack a laugh that all the overweight people were super triggered. There's some girls who still refuse to talk to me and think I'm an awful person over it. I live in a building with 2 laundry rooms, each has 3 washers and 4 dryers. There's usually no issue and honestly, with nowhere to go these days, it's pretty chill. Not the usual Saturday/Sunday routine where everyone is doing their chores. I put 2 loads on today and timed it perfectly. I set a timer, went for a quick run and came back right on time. I've always been respectful of people's laundry and time, and if someone hasn't picked up their stuff, I go to the other laundry room or come back later. To my surprise, as I went to get my laundry, a woman had locked herself up in there and was putting 2 batches in. Then I saw my wet clothes on the table behind. I didn't say anything. Waited for her to be done. Note that, had she gone 10 meters further to the other room, washers were available and empty. I grabbed my stuff and switched the temperature of one of her washers to hot instead of warm. Hope she enjoys some tight clothes. It was 2018, I had just moved out of my parents' place for the first time into a little flat in my local area. I was 24 and was also newly single, so decided to download Tinder to see what it was all about. I started chatting to some guy. Truth be told, I was actually talking to a few guys over the course of a couple weeks or so. Anyway, this guy asked me out and I wasn't feeling it, so made up some excuse. We continued to chat for another week or so. Now it was Friday evening. I had just finished work and was walking home when I checked my phone and had a message from this guy asking me out again and asking me what time I wanted picking up. I made up an excuse again and dismissed it. I finally got back home to my flat and began my weekly routine of cleaning and sorting out my laundry when I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anybody. I stopped what I was doing and walked into the kitchen and peered out of the window to see who it was before I opened the door. Stood there was a dark-haired man, holding a small bunch of flowers. I was confused. I opened the door and I can only imagine how confused I must have looked. He said his name and I just stood there, confused as to how he even knew where I lived. He continued to tell me to get my coat and that we were going out, but I kept telling him I couldn't go. I asked him how he knew where I lived as I'd only just moved in, and he told me that he'd tell me if I went out with him. I refused. He then asked if he could at least come in. I said no. It took me a solid 10 minutes of back and forth talking before he left. When he left he gave me the flowers and said bye. Thankfully it was broad daylight and I had neighbors opposite my front door watching in the corners of their eyes. Anyway, once I closed my front door I messaged him, asking again how he found out my address, and he wouldn't tell me. He just kept saying how he knew people. I then followed this up with a message telling him not to contact me ever again and that him showing up uninvited is not acceptable, especially when I never even told him where I lived to begin with. I threw the flowers he gave me in the bin, and to this day I have not spoken to him since. I also moved out of the flat after my 6-month initial term was up. I'm guessing he was trying to be spontaneous and romantic, but it just ended up being super creepy. I hope I never meet him again. Years ago I ran my own PC repair shop in a small town, small enough that word of mouth works better than advertising in the yellow pages. A business near my shop had lost internet and called me to check it out. I show up and look at their PC. Yup. No internet. Did anyone move it or disconnect the cables? I'm not seeing link lights. Nope. So, I trace the cable back to a patch panel, which then runs to their trailer house. The shop was their garage, which runs to their router under their TV, no power, which runs to the wall wart, unplugged, with a happy-looking little doggo nearby. Here's your problem, sir. Plugged in the plug, walked back to the shop/garage, and voila! Internet. Didn't have the heart to charge him for plugging in a plug the doggo obviously knocked out. I work at a small-town coffee shop that has managed to adapt and stay busy during COVID-19 by utilizing a window for walk-up service. Our regular problematic customer, let's call him TJ, is a typical middle-aged man riddled with toxic masculinity. He often makes female employees and customers uncomfortable with his comments. Lately he's been around a lot, being typical TJ. Today he came to our window and ordered a coffee. Cool, nothing out of the ordinary. A coworker asked him if he would like to tip via our Square register. We normally don't verbally ask customers, but with the current pandemic we are not allowing customers to touch our iPad system. He proceeded to tell her to put 100, and reassured them he wanted to tip that much because he appreciates our hard work and effort and wants to chip in since our business has been a bit slower. Okay, I gave him that and almost have a change of heart about TJ. We both outwardly thank him and he goes on his way. I text my boss about this uncharacteristic interaction with TJ, and through their end of the register system she was able to look at the transaction. They noticed that not only was the credit card he used not in his name, but in his boss's name, on their company card. Typical TJ. What a D-bag. Obligatory happened yesterday. Oh boy, where to start? Basically this weekend me and my girlfriend decided to go to my cabin. Yes, I know, COVID, no vacation homes, whatever, we did it anyways. Now we always enjoy going up there, but this weekend kind of sucked. I was feeling really distant and I had to drive home for a family emergency on Saturday, and she stayed at the cabin for like the 8 hours while I was gone. She wasn't happy, but she understood cause it was a family emergency. Now come yesterday after we packed the place up and headed out. I was talking to my friend in the morning about how I was feeling. Most of what I was feeling was stress-induced, I realize now. Basically came to the conclusion that I needed to have a relationship talk. Now the drive back I was very tired and stressed, and I began to talk about our relationship issues. So I say we need to have a talk about our relationship. So yeah, you can see how that sounds bad. Basically she didn't want to talk about it and got really upset, and the rest of the drive was quiet. Next thing I know, yesterday afternoon her sister texts me about me being a jerk for dumping her sister. I start to freak out cause it wasn't supposed to be a breakup. Whatever, so my girlfriend knows now that I wasn't trying to break up with her, but now she's having mixed emotions and I'm waiting on hearing from her. So yay, here I am, dumb as ever, potentially ruining a great relationship because of what I said. TL, Doctor, I started a convo with my GF off by saying we need to have a talk about our relationship, and now she might be dumping me. Edit, me, M20, and her, F20. And hashtag X200B. This is my first time posting on this sub, so please be nice if I do anything incorrectly. TL Doctor at the bottom. This story begins when I, 20M, was shopping at my local grocery store. I'm just minding my own business when I hear someone over my shoulder ranting about how soft the apples on display were. I turn around and see a lady right in front of me fuming. For storytelling purposes she will be known as Karen, myself as me, and the helpful employee as he. Karen, excuse me. Do you know where I can find some better apples? I've felt all these apples and they're all soft. At first I thought to myself, why are you even touching all the food during a pandemic? Little did I know the worst was yet to come. Me, I'm sorry, I don't work here. Karen, well, you're wearing a mask. All the workers here are wearing a mask. This is a good spot to mention I live in a very conservative town where people, especially the older ones, haven't been social distancing much or wearing masks, and sure enough, this lady was no exception. Me, I'm telling you I don't work here, now please leave me alone. Karen, where's your manager? I'm personally going to have you fired for this. At this point I'd had enough and began to walk away. This was until I felt something hard hit me in the shoulder. This lady just threw one of the apples at me. Me, did you just throw that at me? I asked. Karen, you weren't listening to me, so I had to take matters into my own hands. At this point an actual employee walks over and sees this commotion and asks us what's going on. Karen, your employee here is being very unhelpful and I'd like to speak to a manager about it immediately. What she didn't know is that this helpful employee saw the whole thing and isn't buying a word of what Karen is saying. Hey ma'am, I saw the whole thing and I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store now. Karen, what do you mean I haven't done anything? It takes the employee threatening to call the police before Karen finally gets the message and leaves the store. The employee apologizes profusely and says this isn't the first time he's dealt with that same woman, and if she does it again he's going to call the cops for real. After that I just continued with my shopping like nothing had happened and was just trying to forget about it. Looking back, I wished I would have said something sassy to the lady as she was leaving, but honestly, I was just too much in shock of what happened to do anything. TL Doctor lady asks me to get her apples. When she finds out I don't work there, she throws an apple at me and gets kicked out. First time posting, currently a EMS dispatcher for a private ambulance company for 3 years now. We take some calls, however, they're usually seizures, psych, and falls. This one? Probably should have been psych, but unfortunately she wasn't the patient. This call happened in my first year, while I was pretty fresh and didn't understand the power of controlling a call. And #X200B. Me, okay, tell me exactly what happened. CLR, yeah, my mom fell in the other room, you know we have her locked in there right now, but yeah, she fell and I think she may have hit her head. Me, okay, are you with her now? CLR, well, you see, she has dementia, and we live in a new home, so she is locked in there. You see, we can't have her wandering because of the bears that are around here. Me, have you gone to check on her yet? CLR, no, I can't unlock her door because she will get out and the bears will get her. Me, can you please go check on the patient? CLR, yeah, I think she might have hit her head, it sounded like she hit the end table, that's what woke me up, but even our big dog, insert large dog brand, is afraid to go outside because there are bears here at this new house. Please send the ambulance, but make sure they get in and out quick because the bears will get them. Rinse and repeat for literally every one of the 10 questions involved with a fall. I was essentially working with a third-party caller as she flat out refused to unlock her mother from the room until the EMS got there, let alone even go look at her. And #X200B. I kid you not, I heard way more about these bears than I ever got out of her regarding her fallen mother. While I may have wanted to bash my head into the desk repeatedly asking her the questions, now I can have a good belly laugh over it. From what I do remember though, Mom was transported alright, and no EMTs were mauled by the darn bears. So my friend a couple days ago was asking me for money to borrow $500. She is a very independent woman and don't usually ask me for anything, and I told her I wouldn't give her anything unless she tells me why, and this is when she spilled the whole thing. She's been squandering all her money on this one scammer tarot reader ever since her ex broke up with her. I know it's partly her fault because she fell for it, but this tarot reader is just so evil. She has a large number of moderators and followers and manipulates them into buying readings from her by both a fear tactic saying if they don't do something their GF/BF will leave them, and giving them hope by saying someone they love will come back to them. She manipulated my best friend when she was the weakest after a breakup, and now my best friend is so mind-washed all she does is believe her and spends hours and hours watching her streams like a evil preacher. She has 2 kids and are totally ignoring their needs. The tarot reader also gives my friend stupid advice like go to the graveyard and do rituals and eating raw eggs to be more spiritual. This is purely evil and mind manipulation. But most importantly, she is pushing her own beliefs on my friend and made her go to an anti-lockdown protest where she could have contacted COVID and given it to her children. Her channel is please help me and keep spamming her channel so she can't come on any longer. Small town tech support here. Had a user get internet from local ISP, one of two options, but they couldn't get things to work. Apparently, while trying to connect her router they had blown up the router and had to replace it. She told me a tale of sparks, smoke, and a little fire was involved. So, they had gotten another router, plugged it in, and couldn't get internet on her PC. She said they were there for about 4 hours trying to get it to work. They gave up and just left. Great ISP, and not a surprise was had as they had a crappy rep to begin with. So I stopped by after my shift at another job and took a look. After a couple of seconds I informed her that I discovered the issue. I ran over to my workshop, grabbed an RJ45 cable, Ethernet cable for non-techs, and used it to replace the RJ11 that was going from the router to her PC. RJ11 being a phone cable. Yes, it fits. But it also doesn't fit, it's too small. Internet worked. Charged $15 for the cable and labor and got another tale of woe about this particular ISP to tell my customers about. When I was about 9 or 10, I lived in these really dangerous apartments on the bad side of town. A couple of months after we moved in, this other guy who looked to be in his early 20s moves in a couple apartments away from us. He would constantly be overly sweet to me, and would always let me pick flowers from his garden. We had a playground in the apartments that I would play at after school every day, and he would always show up at the same time every day to try and play with me. Mind you, my family knew about this because my sister, who was about 16 at the time, would also hang out with him, and told me that he was just lonely and trying to be nice. So after a while I didn't think much of it. Well, fast forward 6 months and my family is moving out. He was helping us load furniture into a U-Haul. We stopped to take a break, so I started playing while him and my sister sat on the ramp to the U-Haul and talked. Me being the nosy little 9 or 10-year-old I was, listened in. I hear him say something like, "Darn, your little sister is hot," or something along those lines. My sister then tells him off and yells at him to leave. We never saw that guy after that, and we never told anyone about what he said. Stupid, I know, but we were both also just kids. We were young and stupid. Today went into a local Sainard's, masks on, did the whole nine. The store was not too busy. Went to an available line, no waiting customer behind us, just the one previous, and there was motor oil just dripped down the aisle of the checkout from a customer before. The cashier decided to have a lengthy discussion with the customer before us about how this is communist and that when there is a vaccine, it will just be a microchip to control us like Stefano. When we got to the till, we mentioned that there is something very slippery by her register and that maybe she could call someone to clean it up before she or someone else falls. She told us because of us people she had too many lines and can't get anyone to clean up, she didn't want to. I get it, I am an essential and my husband is also, meat park with extreme precautions, but not slipping on the floor an hour should be a concern, right? Sorry mobile, need to rant. At the unnamed cow-themed fast food restaurant that I work at, there's a guy who always comes in for breakfast to get the same thing, 1, sometimes 2, biscuits and a large fry. We'll call him Bob, but if you're interested you could probably find him. He's the type of customer who you want to get through the line and out of your face as quickly as possible, not because he's confrontational, just because he gives a weird vibe. Generally, he's nice enough, but if you take too long or you're less than friendly he'll bite back at you. In this case, he bit back hard. I was outside taking orders on an iPad when Bob drove up in his car. Usually he comes into the restaurant, but with quarantine in full effect, everybody comes through the drive-thru. Because of this, I assumed he was already in a bad mood, so I took his order and got done with him in 10 seconds. A few cars later, my manager comes out of the restaurant and yells at me to come inside. This was outside of the norm because I had only been outside for 30 minutes, usually we're out there for an hour or two before changing. I finish my current order and head back in. Keep in mind, this is around 8:30 and the dining room is closed, so there are only 4 or so people up front. I go over to drive-thru to see what needs done and overhear everyone else talking to one of my coworkers, who I'll call Matt. Matt's sister, apparently they're an unnamed cow-themed fast food restaurant type of family, is asking him if he called the police. My nosy, interested ears prick up at this point and I start asking what happened. I'm filled in that Bob apparently pulled a gun on Matt because he accidentally shorted his change. I then learn that Bob was waiting for said change in a parking spot in the back of the store. I asked my manager if this was why he told me to come inside, to which he affirmed, remarking how he didn't know that he worked at the ghetto unnamed cow-themed fast food restaurant. A police officer arrives about 15 minutes later and starts asking Matt questions about Bob and what the gun looked like. I, with my dangerous curiosity, peeked out the back door and saw another 2 cops waiting out back. It was at this time that Bob is brought into the restaurant with 2 police officers, for what reason I'm not sure. All the managers and our operator talk to the police and then Bob is patted down and hauled out. I would like to close out this story with one thing I think is absolutely hilarious. Our operator of 45 years recently retired, like last week, so the day this happened was our interim operator's second day at our restaurant. I'm sure they're psyched for another 4 to 6 months with us. Bartender at a local pizza joint. My buddy came in after a long day dealing with his 2 sick little girls. He tells me a story from today about the littlest. She's screaming for him from the bathroom. She states she's been waiting for 60 years for him. All she wanted was a cheese pizza from our place. Since they were sick, he went with something more appropriate for upset stomachs. But you can guarantee I got him a gift certificate for a cheese pizza for her when she's better. Nice to have good customers to even out the bad ones, lol. I worked in housekeeping in a hotel for months up until this past week. I'm now 35 weeks pregnant. I was scheduled to work 5+ days a week, with 20+ rooms to myself. I came into work recently, because I was on the schedule, and I could barely walk. I couldn't bend my back and my ankles were hugely swollen. I had been in L&D the night before to stop contractions. We didn't have many rooms, but 5 housekeepers in-house. Everyone was almost begging my manager to send me home, as we had too many housekeepers for the amount of rooms. Now, I'm huge at this point in pregnancy. I can't bend too far forward in general. We, my manager and I, discussed a couple weeks ago that she didn't want me cleaning bathtubs, so I was to have another housekeeper come clean my bathtubs. No biggie, I was fine with that. Well, the day before I quit I had went to find another HK to help with a bathtub. Said manager stopped us in the hall and asked what we were doing socializing on the clock. We explained that she was going to clean a bathtub for me and would go right back to her rooms. She yelled at me and said that if I can't do my job, I need to quit so that she can hire someone who's willing to work. I explained that it wasn't that I wasn't willing to work, rather that's one small task that I myself struggle with accomplishing. She didn't care. She continued yelling at me. Now, I've always hated being yelled at, so I spent the rest of my shift crying while cleaning my rooms. I got home from work, still crying. My boyfriend became extremely upset as I told him what had happened. We decided that it's in the best interest of our child that I just be done, as it's a lot of emotional trouble as well as physical. So I gave my manager her wish, and I went in and handed in my scrubs and quit. She seemed sympathetic, said she understood, was sad to see me go, and for me to come talk to her after I was released from maternity leave. Fast forward to today, another HK at said hotel was talking to this manager, while recording the conversation to send to me. She asked if I would be back after baby. The manager told her that I was lazy and a crybaby so she would never consider hiring me back. I'm glad I quit. I feel like I dodged a bullet. I'm not sure that I'll ever be able to convince myself to work in housekeeping again. This was several years ago. I was 16 at the time, and I worked at Hershey Park, amusement park for those that don't know. Anyway, I was working at the pirate ship and running the ride who's pretty simple as it's pretty much automatic. Important later, the day is going pretty normal when I start hearing one of the guests complaining about how the line is too long for such a short ride. As the line progresses, he starts getting more vocal and agitated and starts taking it out on the ride attendant. These guys are the ones that make sure that there aren't too many people on the ride, meet height requirements and also have to clean the rides if someone gets sick while on the ride. Anyway, I call the attendant over and ask him if he's okay since the guest was really laying into him and he says that he is fine. I then apologize to him for what I'm about to do. As soon as I said it, he knew what was coming. So it's the enraged guest's turn to get on. We load the ride, but instead of running it on the automatic timer, I decide to give the guy exactly what he wanted and ran it manually, no timer. I ran the ride for 15 minutes straight. Sure enough, the jerk of the story violently throws up all over himself and his friend that was with him. Fortunately, with the exception of one other person, nobody was upset for running it so long and a few people even came over and thanked me for giving him what he deserved. TL, Doctor, guest complains that amusement park ride is too short so I run it manually and make him sick. My wife's father had significant health problems for years, and we both were aware that in the near future we wouldn't have much longer with him. We'd made plans to visit over the summer, as he lived in another state 1,000 miles away. After about a week of not hearing from him, I called the local PD to do a wellness check, and they found he had passed away in his home alone. We flew out during the initial wave of the pandemic to clear out his home, and try to handle the legalities involved. Hard luck though, all the courts are closed, so even with a will this is a process that we're now expecting to take over a year. And #X200B. My wife has a horrible fear of death stemming from finding her sibling dead as a child, and the week we were at his house was, I'd imagine, the worst week of her life. We were in the house her father had died in. She felt horrible guilt that she wasn't able to say goodbye and that he died alone. The probate process was tangled up because of pandemic closures. We weren't sure if he died due to the virus or not and were potentially risking ourselves being in a home that was contaminated. And because of the closures we didn't have much choice but to throw much of his life into the trash since there was nowhere to donate items. It was rough. And #X200B. Fast forward a month later, and we're back home watching movies in quarantine high on some bud we picked up driving back, because our planes got grounded twice. It came out my wife had never watched Up, The Incredibles, or Monsters Incorporated, so we were picking one of the three. I hyped Up pretty hard, it's a masterpiece, how can anybody not love it, and she wanted to watch it. And #X200B. She sobbed through the entire move. I stupidly convinced her after 15 minutes into power through the sadness because the movie picks up. By the time halfway through I realized how close to home the film was hitting. She wouldn't let me turn it off because she wanted to see how it ended. After the end she continued crying, and while she said the film was good she hated it, and did not find the end heartwarming or even bittersweet. And #X200B. TL, doctor, I made my wife confront her fear of death with the kids moving about loss, legacy, and loneliness shortly after the death of her dad, and now I've given up moving picking privileges for the foreseeable future. I am 14. I am a certified referee in my state. I know the rules as I've played by them my whole life along with taking the officiating classes. At our park district, no headers for ages below 11. But in U12, it is up to the referee's discretion. So if it's a small tap it's okay. That is exactly what happens. So the coach behind me screams at the top of his lungs there are no headers in U12 5 to 16 times. I ignore him. Though I could eject him. It was last game of the season and I didn't care. After a bit of yelling, he says fine, go duck yourself then, which I turn and tell at him for saying in front of U11 kids. I wish I sent him away or ended the match. Sadly I didn't do much and my partner is a long-time referee, officiated my matches as I grew up, and he is deaf. So he has no idea what happened. The person who runs Park District in my area has been informed and is taking action. For clarification, 15F here. A couple of months ago, before the pandemic, me and my family were on a trip to Thailand. Since I'm from Scandinavia my skin always go really white in wintertime, which means I get sunburned very easily. The sun is also really strong in Thailand. We tried our best to stay in the shade and use plenty of sunscreen but nonetheless, I got severely burned. Especially in the face. That's why we decided to buy me a sun hat so I could be in the sun without my face getting worse. So we visited this little store where you could buy all sorts of cheap holiday stuff. Bikinis, sunglasses, etc. and I found a hat that I liked. It was a white rip-off Nike hat with some sort of palm leaves on it. This is where the FU begins. I walked everywhere with this hat, in the swimming pool, on the beach, out for dinner, at any time I would be exposed to the sun. I felt good about it at the time. I even went to a temple with the hat. Not going inside though, I'm positive 500 plus people saw me wearing this hat. Not once did I wonder what those leaves were. Anyway, I returned home, everything was fine until recently, when the weather was good outside. We had decided to eat outside for the very first time this year. The sun was quite strong, so I decided to put my sun hat on. That's when it dawned on me that I'd been wearing a cannabis print hat on my entire holiday. I have literally no idea how I didn't realize. TL, drive. Accidentally wore a cannabis print hat because I thought it was palm leaves. So today I went to the supermarket with my girlfriend. Because of COVID we can come in individually and we have to keep a safe distance between everyone. So I told her that we will meet outside within 30 minutes. I waited 45 minutes and she didn't come. I was upset with her and I sent her a text saying hey I'm waiting for you outside, we said 30 minutes, you always take so long _ Seconds later she is coming out with a lot of bags and stuff which is not usual since she usually just buy a couple of groceries. What she did was that she bought a lot of groceries for 4 families and she took the time to split basic cans, groceries, bread, soup and other stuff, even some candies, in each bags, so in our way back we could drive by and deliver it to people in need. Needless to say that I felt like a complete idiot. TL, Doctor, I was impatient with my girlfriend buying groceries when she was doing it for a good cause. This girl cheated on, lied to, abused my good friend for 4 years of his life, and he's still trying to recover. She is horrible and dumped my friend after he had the gall to point out that she is abusive. She's also racist, sexist and entitled. Now she's moved on to abusing another guy. I have her address, her Instagram, her and her family's FB, but not her email. I need to do this anonymously. Nobody can know it's me. How can I prevent her from doing this to anyone else? How can I get back at her for completely destroying my friend's self-esteem? Tifu, well, a couple years ago, while going to college, I found a place 30 minutes away on the edge of a redwood forest. A little pretense. I'm 6'5" and at the time weighed about 275 pounds. Wanting to share my excitement of this place, I invited a couple girls I really didn't know that well to come see the house after class. After surviving the windy roads, which I drove way too fast on, we arrived at this magical place. In hindsight, they were already behaving a little nervously, but at the time I was just too darn excited about the place to notice. Now, being a bit of a country boy, I wanted to show them some fun things to do. So I led them behind the house into the woods and grabbed a hatchet. Here's where there became a blatant difference in assumed activities between these girls and I. Me just wanting to show them good times derived from chucking a hatchet at a stump. And them who thought I was going to use the hatchet for slightly more nefarious purposes. They screamed and ran. I immediately realized what it looked like and dropped the hatchet. Not wanting them to get lost in the woods, I ran to explain the misunderstanding. Growing up by a forest, I can move pretty quickly through the thick of it. So catching up was not an issue. The issue was convincing them of the innocence behind what had just occurred. Needless to say, they were not amused, and after giving them a ride back to campus, never talked to me again. TLDR, accidentally appeared to be a hatchet-wielding psycho after taking girls to the woods. TLDR, thousands of shop-level employees got laid off based on a computer algorithm the corporate office designed that doesn't factor in seniority and gives preference to certain employees. Store managers and corporate office employees were not affected at all by these layoffs. Please feel free to ask me any questions, I have lots of free time now. And #X200B. I work at a Take 5 oil change, same thing as Jiffy Lube, for 5 years and was terminated yesterday along with 1,000 other lube techs. All the stores only have 1 to 3 people working there now. Nobody at the corporate level got let go, all the store managers are still working, and the rest was left up to a computer algorithm. I took pictures of our company's organizational charts in ADP before they locked me out, showing that corporate employees were not affected at all. The regional manager, who is in charge of over 60 stores, actually said that corporate's computers picked which assistant managers and lube techs would stay and which ones would be terminated, with preference given to some assistant managers. I have no say in the matter. Apparently experience wasn't a factor in this algorithm. Lube techs who had worked there for more than 20 years got laid off, while some techs who just started last year are still being employed. In the letter they sent out to everyone, they stated that all employees terminated will be considered for rehire subject to work history. They aren't even guaranteeing their jobs back, they're basically telling us we need to fill out an application again and hope for a callback. Does this seem pretty messed up, or is it just me? How can a company lay off people so easily without care? It sounds like they are using the current events as an opportunity to clean house and start fresh with new people once things settle down. I can't imagine a company anywhere that lets a computer tell them who can stay and who can leave during a layoff. I think what bothers me the most is that I know very well the expendable shop-level employees are only getting laid off so the company can afford to pay the management and corporate employees. They still have 10 employees on payroll making $70–80K a year for unit growth and development. This company is not doing any growing or expanding right now, couldn't they let some of those people go? Thank you for taking the time to read. I just really wanted to vent my frustrations. If what they are doing isn't illegal, then it is certainly the shadiest thing I have ever come across. Some background. In 2014, the Broadduses, a family with 3 young children, bought their dream home in Westfield, New Jersey. They soon started receiving threatening letters stating that the house was being stalked. The letters continued and the family was forced to sell as they did not feel safe in the home. A much more detailed version in the link below. And #X200B. My theory. I actually grew up in northern New Jersey, in a town very similar to Westfield. One of the most important parts of the story is the affluent nature of the town. It's a suburban community for people who make bank in NYC. From personal experience, I grew up these kinds of people. They often think they're above the law and can do as they please. They're also very petty. When I first found out about the case, I was instantly reminded of this story from a nearby town. To sum it up, a wealthy family was sending anonymous threats to the local town basketball coach for not playing their teenage son. The threats were often directed at his young children, with specifics about them, and resulted in high levels of psychological trauma for him and his wife. Sound familiar? The similarity between the two stories has led me to believe that the watcher is not a mentally deranged stalker, but some wealthy suburbanite who has petty personal issues with the Broadduses or the old owners of the house. They hired someone to investigate the Broadduses when they first started moving in, which explains how they knew the birth order and nicknames of the children. This is what the family did in the basketball coach story, so it stands to reason that some other wealthy couple wouldn't do something similar. Because the first letter didn't involve information about the new owners and there was a letter sent to the old owners first, I think that the watcher had issues with the original owners of the house, not the Broadduses. To sum it up, I believe that some wealthy couple had petty issues with the old owners of the property. Knowing that they were soon moving out, they decided to send threatening letters to them and investigate the new family, the Broadduses, moving in. This was done so that the old family would be forced to take back the property or end up being sued by the Broadduses. Basically, I strongly believe that the sick and evil watcher is really just a Karen or her husband. Let me know what you guys think or if you have any other theories of the watcher's identity. When I was 17, I used to deliver for a well-known pizza place in the area. Of course, Fridays were always insane and this Friday was supposedly going to be the biggest. Halfway through the night I got a delivered to a home for a specialty pie with 5 toppings. The bill came out to $35. Pizza was deep dish when given toppings, so the price was always jacked up, and was hopping for another good tip to bring my night to about $50. As I'm walking up to the door I can hear them trying to shush their dog. Usually whenever this were to happen it was common courtesy for the customer to come outside to avoid any issues with their dog. Well, they open the door and their 100-pound husky comes bolting out, jumps, bites my arm and then attacks the pizza. Luckily I was okay and very disoriented from the whole situation and wasn't sure what to do since the pizza was all over their front steps. They freaked out and continuously apologized. They informed me that they would call the store and order a new pie and pay for both and tip me extra. However, they sent me on my way without ever paying me. My 17-year-old mind was still messed up from getting attacked by their dog. Getting back to the store I find out they never called and we couldn't find their phone number to contact them. Got bit by their dog and ended up not making anything after it all.